Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's episode, we are jumping into a single brewer review series. I'm going to have two back-to-back. It may be hard to believe when I tell you what it is, but I have never had beers by this brewer, and they are readily available. I'll be honest, I wasn't a fan of the bottle art, and as ludicrous as that sounds, that's why I never picked any of these up. But I figured it was high tide, pun intended, to try a couple of these beers. So today we are going to do an IPA review of Kona Brewing Company, starting with the Castaway IPA. This is a 6% ABV. They are based out of Kona, Hawaii, though it could be brewed either in Kona, in Portland, Oregon, or in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And I legitimately have no clue in which city these were brewed, and that's true for both of them. The second beer is Kona Brewing's Hanalei Island IPA. This is 4.5%, so you could call it a session, and it's brewed with passionfruit, orange, and guava. So two completely different IPAs from the same brewer. Both ought to be really interesting, I imagine. One quite a bit lighter than the other, and with fruit, one just a base IPA. So I'm really excited to jump in finally and see what Kona Brewing's offerings are all about. So we're going to get started with their Castaway IPA, 6% ABV. Okay, so getting started with our first beer today, this is the Kona Brewing's Castaway. This is an IPA, 6% ABV. Again, they are based out of Kona, Hawaii, but it could be brewed in either Kona, Portland, Oregon, or Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Don't know which, but nonetheless, doesn't really matter all that much. Bottle art, it's got what looks like a sail-bearing canoe heading across the ocean. Maybe a early version makeshift catamaran. It's got a couple buoys on the side attached. Nonetheless, let's get this poured straight in the glass. Oh, this is a lovely classic IPA color. Very light golden. Not a deep, deep amber. That's what I like to see in a standard IPA. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Perfectly clear, not a hint of haze in sight. That is a thing of absolute beauty, IPA fans. IPA purists, this ought to be melting your heart. It is indeed mine. Poured a beautiful, beautiful, lush, creamy head. This has got very, very fine, quite slow, not super duper active, but very, very fine champagne-like, super fine carbonation bubbles coming up from the top. And I'm sure that helped to create this beautifully lush, creamy, foamy head. Interestingly enough, that said, it does appear to have a composition of fine, medium, and large bubbles, but it's holding its own. It's really retaining. I don't see much breakaway at all. It's really, really holding quite beautifully. Let's jump in and give it a sniff. Okay, it smells very nice. It smells like a classic IPA. You can smell the malt back, but the dominant hop aroma is certainly on the forefront of this beer. It smells like a mix of both floral and earthy hops. Kind of an even mix, maybe a little bit more floral forward than earthy, but that's the mix of hop aromas I'm getting. Yeah, it smells great. It smells like a classic standard IPA, which I absolutely love. So I'm going to jump right in, and we're going to see what this is about. Super creamy. Not super pungent. This is not a pungent IPA, but the hops come through quite clearly. But they don't have a super ridiculous bitter kick. It's very well balanced. The mouthfeel is ridiculously creamy. The body is medium, medium light. 6%, it's not that high of an ABV. It's on the low end for an IPA. But it's medium, medium light. Finish is super clean. The hops are the dominant characteristic that come through in this beer. Although you can smell the malt quite clearly on the aroma, the hops really are the star of the show. They're not super pungent. It's not knock you out kind of bitters. It's balanced. This is very, very well balanced. Reasonably long finish. The floral and earthy hop mix is about 50-50 on the flavor. If anything, maybe slightly more earthy in flavor than you get on the aroma. It's a little more floral on the aroma, a little more earthy on the flavor, but it's pretty evenly balanced. It's close to 50-50. Those earthy hops rather linger, and then the floral hops kind of make their way back in to help extend this finish. I'm going to jump back in just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Super creamy mouthfeel, medium light body. Opens up into an absolute bouquet of hops. And it's not pungent bitters. They're there. You get that lingering bitter. And it's that lingering earthy bitter that comes through almost like a Fuggle Plus. Like akin to a Fuggle, but a little more impetus on the bittering side. Although it's not West Coast style IPA by any stretch. It's not pungent, astringent bitter. But they're there. And that's the dominant flavor that comes through. Indeed, on the taste, you only just get a hint of the malt bill on the very, very back. The hops are the star of the show in this beer, and it's very, very well balanced. This is an IPA that I think that people are just getting into IPAs, or people that don't like quite as intense a bitter of an IPA would really go for. It's very, very good. It's very, very well balanced without being oppressively bitter and oppressively hop forward and intense. This is exceptionally well balanced. It's very clean, very crisp, and it does have a long finish. I'm still tasting that dominant earth with floral behind it bitter on the back, and it really does extend for quite a while. Even though it's not viscous, the hops really do stick around the palate and help extend that finish. This is a very, very clean beer. I'm going to take my time and sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we're going to get to number 2, the Hanalei Island IPA, which is really, it's a session, although they didn't term it that. 4.5% ABV. It's been brewed with passion fruit, orange, and guava. And that's coming up next. Okay, now jumping into beer number 2 of today's Kona Brewing Company IPA review. This is their Hanalei Island IPA. It's passion fruit, guava, and orange. 4.5% ABV on this one, so really it's more of a session IPA. This is not a standard IPA. This is squarely in session range, though they don't call it that. That's what I'm calling it because, frankly, that's what it is. Let's see. For the bottle art on this one, no catamarans on this one, but a couple of kayakers kayaking across Hanalei Bay there, I guess. Let's get this poured in. I expect it might be a bit darker in appearance. Actually, no, it's equally light. I am genuinely surprised by that given the fruit additions. Rough it down the middle, give that head a chance to form. Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad. All right, appearance-wise, this is another stunningly beautifully clear IPA the way as God intended them. Not a hint of haze in sight. It is crystal clear. It is the classic beautiful pale yellow, slight orange hue from the fruit, but it's still mostly true to the standard IPA color. It's reasonably effervescent. The size of the carbonation is really kind of a medium small, so it's helped start kind of a creamy head, but the bubbles are just too big. It's already just killing it as they're rising to the top of the glass. So not the end of the world, but nonetheless, you should know about it. I'll tell you what, aroma-wise, this smells absolutely amazing. You can really, really smell all of the fruit in here. The orange pops out, the guava pops out, and the passion fruit pops out, really almost in equal parts. You can also smell the hoppy back, and it does smell like a floral kind of hoppy back, though it could just be getting masked by the fruit. Yeah, we'll see when we dive in, which I'm about to do here now. So. That's nice. That's a nice beer, particularly for a session. This beer is full of flavor, absolutely full of flavor. Now, Just as with the Castaway IPA we reviewed prior, the hops are in there enough that they come through and, oh yeah, this has got some bitters to it, but it's very, very, very mild. Really, this beer is all about the balance of that hop mildness, the malt bill, and the fruit that they put in here. And the fruit really comes through quite strongly in the flavor profile. This is very, very nice. It's not often you get a session with that much flavor. This is really up there, high on the list. Body's medium light, as you might expect from a session. It's exactly what I expected. Mouthfeel is quite creamy, quite silky actually. Given that the carbonation is not super fine bubbles, I'm a little surprised by that, and pleasantly so. It's got a lovely mouthfeel. It's actually got a little viscosity to it, and that's really helping the fruit flavors and the malt bill and the hops kind of linger in there and stick around the palate, which is giving it quite a longer finish than average for a session, certainly. I would say it's on the higher end of length of finish. I'm going to jump in so I can see exactly where these flavors develop. Up front, first thing, it's all fruit. Fruit grows in intensity, then you start to taste the malt base. And then about a second after that, the hop profile comes in, and although it smelled floral, it doesn't taste it. It tastes just like with the Castaway, really earthy bitters. Mild, but they're there. And then once all three of those different flavor segments kind of come into making their presence known, they really are in perfect harmony from there on out. And it gets more intense with the flavor, and then just like with the Castaway, they come back down and cascade down perfectly even. You get just a beautiful thirds, hop, malt, and fruit, and it's very, very well balanced. This, as a session IPA, is exceptional. This, in my opinion, is a much better example of a session than the prior was of a standard IPA. This has got a lot going for it for this style. It's got so much more flavor than your average session, and it's not over the top, and it's not heavy. So, you know, that's kind of part of the point of a session. You want something with a hot bite, but without quite as high of an ABV. But this beer still has presence. It's got body, it's got mouthfeel, and it's got staying power with that finish. It's just beautifully balanced, and I really, really enjoy this one. I'm going to take my time and sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these beers, we're going to go through getting them ranked. Starting with the Castaway, this is their standard IPA, 6% ABV. Again, Kona Brewing is based out of Kona, Hawaii, though these beers could be brewed either in Kona, Hawaii, Portland, Oregon, or in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They have 3 different brewing sites, which makes sense since Hawaii is terrifically far away from the mainland. Nonetheless, starting with the aroma on this one, it was nice. It was certainly above average, and it gave you a sense of what you might be able to get in the beer, but it wasn't overtly pungent. I gave it a 7 out of 10 for the taste. I enjoyed the taste on this, and I really appreciated that it was kind of an earthy bitter profile, which is kind of two-way tie for my preferred flavor, hop flavor profile in a beer. I like earthy, and I like pine and resinous West Coast style IPA kind of territory. But this, for me, for a standard IPA, it was a bit tame. It had a good flavor, but the hops just weren't present enough for me. I still gave it above average. I gave it a 7. Body on this one. As a 6% IPA, this is kind of in the middle range of where they fall typically. I did expect it to have a significantly bigger body than it did. It was on the low end of average. I gave it a 4. Mouthfeel on this. Had an excellent mouthfeel for an IPA. It had a little bit of viscosity to it, and it was really nice and creamy, and it had super fine effervescence to help create that really silky mouthfeel. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Finish on this was nice. It was certainly longer than average, but not as long as some of the more hop forward, more hop pungent IPAs out there, and certainly those help extend the length of the experience on each sip. This did well, but a little more hops in there, it would have done better. It gets an 8 out of 10. Head and retention on this one was great. It poured a nice, beautifully creamy head, and it had pretty good staying power too, considering I poured it at home, wasn't on a tap. We've talked about it many times, you know, cleanliness of glassware, how well or how poorly you pour the beer are the three main factors when we're talking head creation and retention. And this did a pretty good job considering, and it was close to what I would expect at a bar. I gave it a 9 out of 10. Appearance-wise, this was a textbook IPA appearance. It fell right in that color range that I expect to see. That's what I think of and expect to see when I order an IPA. Got a 10 out of 10. Balance-wise, this was a well-balanced beer, and you could get the malt composition that they used in the beer, and you could also get the hops. But again, for me, IPAs, just the hops need to be forward, and they weren't forward enough for my liking. I gave it an 8 out of 10, above average. Feeling it intangible, I liked it. Yet again, I come back to the hops. It's got to have more hops than that in an IPA for me to kick it up, but I still gave it a 7. Finally, as an example of the style, not a bad IPA by any stretch. It's certainly on the high end of average, but its lack of hop pungency held it back for me. I give it a 6 out of 10. That brings the total score to a 76 out of 100. Moving on to our second beer, the Hanalei Island IPA. This is really a session. It's 4.5% ABV, passion fruit, orange, and guava in this one. The aroma on this one was nice, certainly well above average, and you could really smell the fruit that went in there, and you could still smell a bit of the hops. I thought they might be a floral type of hop, you know, just on the aroma alone. Turned out they weren't, but it had a nice aroma, well above average. I gave it an 8. Taste-wise, this was a very, very well done session IPA. Typically, they're not as flavor forward, but I think the volume of fruit that they put in here really helped the cause, and it helped bring the flavor forward and bring it out, make it more pungent than you typically get in a session. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Body on this, for a session, this was great. It actually had a little more substance than your average session. You know, lower ABV, 4.5, there's fewer fermentables, tends to produce a lower body, but this was an exception. I give it a 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel, just as with the Castaway, for the same reasons, it gets a 10 out of 10. Finish on this one. Had a very nice finish. Considering it's a session, again, another trait of sessions is they don't typically stick with you quite as long just because there's not as much body, not as much viscosity. Typically, there's lower flavor, but this one had a lot going for it with the fruit, and even the hops paired with it and helped it come out. It gets an 8 out of 10. Head and retention on this one was not that great. It was high end of average, but it certainly didn't excel. It created it, albeit small, but the carbonation, really the bubbles, there were too many medium ones in there. It just caused the head to collapse. It gets a 6 out of 10. Appearance-wise, this was another textbook. That's exactly what I expect to see. Slightly lighter in color than this one, which you expect, fewer fermentables. It gets a 10 out of 10. Balance. This was an exceptionally well-balanced session. You could taste the full malt bill, you could taste individually all of the fruit, and you could still taste the hops, and they worked in equal harmony. This was an exceptionally well-balanced beer. Nothing overshadowed anything else. It gets a 10 out of 10. Filling in the intangible. I really, really enjoyed this. Session IPAs are nice. I like to go for them because I love IPAs. But you know, the higher ABV, sometimes you want that extra beer. If you're drinking standard IPAs, it's harder to do. But sessions, nice low ABV, you know, you can grab them. And this was a very exceptionally well-balanced example, and I really enjoyed it. The flavor was quite pronounced. I gave it a 9 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, again, this is another exceptional session IPA. It has a whole lot going for it. I really do believe that. Certainly in the top tier that I could think of. Have I had better? Absolutely I have. But is this among the top tier? It is. I give it a 9 out of 9. That brings the total score on the Hanalei Island IPA to an 88 out of 100. So all total, a 12-point spread, and the session rated higher than the standard, and it's really just based on how they turned out. This had far more presence than your average session, and this didn't have nearly enough hop bite for me. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, that's today's review. As always, I sincerely appreciate you tuning in. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Subscribe will keep the videos in your feed. Like helps the channel, helps others find us. And comments are really big. I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts, questions, suggestions? Let me know. I am here for you. Lastly, if you want to make sure you don't miss when any of our videos go live, you can click the notification bell right next to the subscribe button, and that will let you know right when they go live to YouTube. Folks, until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.